On a July night in 1994 in Scottsdale, Arizona, Angela Marie Maher, just 21, was heading home after a simple act of kindness, a ride for a friend. But in a cruel twist of fate, her path crossed with that of a drunken driver whose recklessness would shatter lives and evade justice. Angela Maher was born and raised in Scottsdale, Arizona. Her father's untimely demise in 1991 left a void in her life, but Angela and her family continued to support one another with resilience and love. In high school, Angela's caring nature became evident through her active involvement with Students Against Drunk Driving, a movement she embraced passionately after losing a close friend to a drunk driving accident. By 1994, Angela was a senior at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, where she continued to excel academically and personally. In late July 1994, Angela returned home to Scottsdale for a brief visit, intending to celebrate her mother Rosemarie's 57th birthday. After the birthday celebrations were over, Angela set out at around 10 p.m. in her mother's white Oldsmobile to pick up a friend from a local bar, Styx, before returning home. Angela drove southbound along Scottsdale Road, heading toward her destination. But unbeknownst to her, 31-year-old Gloria Schulze was leaving a bar called Thunder and Lightning. Gloria, having consumed a considerable amount of alcohol, was visibly impaired as she got behind the wheel of her maroon van. Moments before the collision, Gloria's van, traveling in the opposite direction as Angela's, drifted across the center line. Despite Angela's attempt to warn Gloria with a horn blast, the driver of the van failed to correct her course. The two vehicles collided violently, with Gloria's van slamming into Angela's car and driving over it. The crash occurred just 5 minutes from Angela's home. The impact was catastrophic. Angela, who was not wearing her seatbelt, suffered severe blunt force trauma to her head. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but the severity of the crash meant there was nothing they could do. Angela was pronounced deceased at the scene. As the news spread, Rose Maher, who had been anxiously waiting for her daughter's return, was met by police officers. Shortly before 1 a.m., they informed her that Angela had been in an accident. The heartbreaking news that her daughter's life had been cut short by a drunk driver was just the beginning of a prolonged and painful fight for justice. Gloria remained at the scene, and her condition was evident from the start. The police noted her bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, and the strong odor of alcohol. A breathalyzer test revealed her blood alcohol content to be 0.15, well above the legal limit, and traces of marijuana were also found in her system. Despite these clear indicators of intoxication, the legal response was astonishingly lenient. Gloria was not arrested immediately, but was instead taken to the hospital for treatment of her injuries. This decision sparked outrage and confusion within the Maher family, who struggled to understand why Gloria remained free while they were left to bury their daughter. The legal proceedings then commenced with Gloria facing charges of manslaughter and reckless endangerment. Employing a high-priced attorney, Gloria's defense team succeeded in obtaining 6 postponements of the trial. Throughout this period, Gloria was ordered to submit to substance testing and report to the court weekly, but she began to miss appointments and failed to comply with these requirements. As the trial date approached in April 2001, Gloria Schulze began preparing for her escape. Within weeks of the scheduled court appearance, she sold 2 of her vehicles and liquidated her credit cards, making her departure less conspicuous. By the time the trial began, Gloria had vanished. Her empty seat in the courtroom sparked the beginning of a nationwide manhunt. Gloria's disappearance was a severe blow, leaving the family with a profound sense of betrayal and frustration. Despite extensive efforts, including features on America's Most Wanted and various national media outlets, Gloria Schulze remained elusive. In the spring of 2024, a breakthrough in the long-buried case of Angela Maher's perpetrator surfaced, delivering a shockingly unexpected twist. For decades, Gloria Schulze had evaded capture by fleeing the country and reinventing herself. The cold case had seemed destined to remain unresolved until an anonymous tip led investigators to a surprising discovery. The breakthrough came after an anonymous source reached out to the Scottsdale police, directing them to a news article that had been published in Yellowknife, Canada. This article was an obituary for a woman named Kate Dooley, who had lived in Yellowknife and had passed away from cancer in December 2019. The article detailed Dooley's life in Canada, including her involvement in local community events and her work in the mining industry. The name Kate Dooley was a significant clue. Through further investigation, it became evident that Kate Dooley was, in fact, Gloria Schulze, the elusive drunk driver who had fled the United States in the wake of her fatal crime. Gloria had successfully evaded the American justice system by adopting a new identity and starting a new life far from her past. In Yellowknife, she became a well-known figure, admired for her work in organizing community fireworks shows and contributing to local events. She had blended into her new community, far removed from the crime she had committed nearly 3 decades earlier. Upon learning of Gloria's new identity, Scottsdale investigators re-examined the case. They found that Gloria had been arrested again in 2009 in Yellowknife for a DUI, a glaring indication that her criminal history had followed her across borders. Despite this, the arrest did not prompt a notification to the U.S. authorities or a connection to her past offenses. Gloria had managed to slip through the cracks, continuing her life under her new identity without the shadow of her past crimes catching up with her. The revelation of Gloria's new identity and her life in Canada stirred up a storm of emotions for the Maher family. While Gloria Schulze had passed away before justice could be served, the discovery brought a semblance of closure to a case that had long seemed forgotten. In December 1985, the peaceful community of St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, was rocked by a violent crime that would remain unsolved for nearly 40 years. On the early morning of December 12, 1985, Yvonne Menka, a 45-year-old mother of 4, was found slain in the stairwell of her apartment building. The investigation into Yvonne's demise quickly revealed a complex web of personal relationships and unresolved tensions. This suggested that the crime was not a random act of violence, but rather a deliberate and calculated act. Despite extensive efforts by law enforcement, the case remained a mystery for decades, until a breakthrough split the case wide open. Yvonne Menka, a 45-year-old mother of 4, was a well-regarded member of the local community. Yvonne was entangled in a tumultuous love triangle involving a man named Jack Owen. Yvonne and Owen were in a relationship that was complicated by his involvement with another woman. This love triangle would set the stage for the tragic events that were to unfold. On the early morning of December 12, 1985, Yvonne left her apartment to start her car, unaware that a violent confrontation was about to occur. The crime scene was a rear stairwell of her apartment building. As Yvonne approached her vehicle, she was ambushed by an assailant who had been lying in wait. The attack was cold and deliberate, the perpetrator, having stalked her and planned the attack with chilling precision, followed her. Once they reached the stairwell, the assailant shot Yvonne 3 times. 1 shot struck her in her neck, and 2 more hit her in the back of her head as she lay on the ground, incapacitated and vulnerable. The brutal execution left Yvonne to pass away alone on the dark and cold stairwell. The crime scene was discovered shortly after the crime had been committed, with investigators finding Yvonne's lifeless body and the shell casings from the shots fired. The investigation revealed that the crime was not a spur-of-the-moment act, but rather a premeditated and methodical execution. Following the discovery of Yvonne's body, law enforcement immediately launched a comprehensive investigation into her slaying. The initial focus was on gathering evidence from the crime scene. Detectives meticulously examined the rear stairwell of her apartment building, collecting the shell casings and other potential forensic evidence. Despite their efforts, the investigation faced significant challenges due to the limited number of witnesses and the early hour at which the crime occurred. The community was quiet, and no one reported seeing anything unusual that morning. The forensic evidence collected, including the bullet casings, was sent for analysis. But without immediate links to a suspect, progress was slow. Detectives explored various theories about the motive behind the crime, but the case remained unsolved, and the investigation grew cold over time. In the years that followed, the case was assigned to a cold case unit. Detectives in this unit revisited the evidence and re-examined the case with fresh perspectives and the benefit of new forensic technologies. Advances in forensic science, such as improved DNA analysis techniques, were applied to the evidence in the hope of finding new clues. Despite these renewed efforts, the investigation did not immediately result in any breakthroughs. At least, not until 2022. In 2022, investigators got the break they had been desperately hoping for. Enhanced forensic techniques led to the identification of a DNA match, which linked the evidence to a specific individual previously unknown to the investigation. This individual, Mary Jo Bailey, had lived under the radar for decades. But once her name surfaced, a deeper investigation revealed her possible connection to the case. Bailey's history and background were scrutinized, and it was discovered that she had been involved in a romantic relationship with Jack Owen, who was also connected to Yvonne Menke. This relationship, coupled with the newly discovered forensic evidence, provided a substantial motive and a clear link to the crime. As the investigation tightened around Bailey, law enforcement conducted a thorough search of her past and interviewed her acquaintances. The evidence accumulated pointed increasingly towards Bailey as a prime suspect. The investigation team gathered enough corroborative evidence to seek an arrest warrant. In August 2023, Bailey was arrested in Arizona, where she had been living. Bailey was charged with first degree, and the arrest received significant media attention due to the dramatic turnaround in a case that had gone cold for nearly 40 years. Following her arrest, Bailey was extradited to Wisconsin to face trial. The judicial process began with a series of pre-trial motions and hearings. During this period, Bailey maintained her innocence and did not provide any statements or explanations regarding the crime. The trial, which took place in 2024, was highly anticipated and closely followed by the public, with many hoping for justice for Yvonne Menke and her family after decades of waiting. Mary Jo Bailey was sentenced on July 2, 2024, to life in prison. She will be eligible for parole in 20 years. The resolution of the case brought a sense of closure to Yvonne's family, who had lived with the pain of her loss and the uncertainty of an unsolved crime for years. Before Bailey's sentence was announced, 3 of Yvonne's children, Julie Connors, Sue Raska, and James Menke Jr., provided statements. Julie said, "You waited in a dark stairwell to maliciously take the life of my mom. You sentenced us to a life filled with pain, sadness, and hurt." James Jr. said, "To me, this is not justice. She got to lead her life. We did not live ours. But it is as close as it is going to get. So now we can finally put this behind us. But Bailey should never be let out again." In May 1996, Laura Lolly Winans and Julianne Julie Williams set out for a serene getaway in Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. But what was meant to be a peaceful retreat would turn into a horrifying nightmare. The couple disappeared, and after weeks, the search for the missing women culminated in a heartbreaking discovery. With advancements in forensic technology, the case was reignited, and a breakthrough would finally unravel decades of questions. Lolly Winans and Julie Williams lived lives centered on their love for nature and dedication to helping others. Lolly, who was 26 at the time, had a dynamic personality that seemed made for the wilderness. Growing up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, she came from a privileged background, but felt more at home in hiking boots than in the structured world she had known. After leaving her traditional college education, Lolly found her calling at Unity College in Maine, a school that emphasized environmental studies and sustainability. There, she trained to become a wilderness guide and worked with at-risk youth, using nature as a tool for healing and growth. 24-year-old Julie had just graduated from Carleton College in Minnesota, where she earned a degree in geology. Julie's connection to nature was deeply academic as well as personal. She wanted to dedicate her life to studying and protecting the environment. The two women had met through shared circles in the outdoor community, and their relationship grew out of a mutual love for nature. They complemented each other, Lolly's outgoing nature balanced by Julie's quieter presence. Together, they planned a trip to Shenandoah National Park in May 1996 as a way to celebrate their love and take a break from their busy lives. But what should have been a peaceful trip ended in unimaginable tragedy. As the sun set on May 24, 1996, the peace of Shenandoah National Park was disrupted. Lolly Winans and Julie Williams, who had been relishing their getaway, had promised to check in with their families regularly. When days passed with no word from them, concern began to mount. By May 29th, Julie's worried parents reported them missing to local authorities, prompting a search that would eventually lead to a devastating end. Park rangers, assisted by local volunteers and state troopers, scoured the trails and campsites where Lolly and Julie were last known to be. Their task was daunting, as the vast expanse of the park, combined with the dense foliage and rugged terrain, made the search challenging. It was not until June 1st that the search yielded a breakthrough. Rangers, their concern growing with each passing hour, combed through a more secluded part of the park near the Skyland Resort. Hidden away in the underbrush near the edge of their campsite, the Rangers found the bodies of Lolly and Julie. The scene was chilling. The women were found with their throats slashed, their bodies nude and exposed, left in a manner that spoke of a violent and deliberate act. Early on in the investigation, the focus shifted to Daryl David Rice, a man with a troubling past. Rice, a local resident with a known history of violence against women, became a prime suspect. Authorities noted that Rice had previously been accused of attacks in the same park, which seemed to draw a troubling connection to the brutal slayings. Rice was charged, and the case seemed to be heading toward a resolution. But the investigation faced a major setback. In 2004, the prosecutors dropped the charges against Rice when DNA evidence conclusively failed to link him to the crime scene. The revelation was a crushing blow for those seeking justice for Lolly and Julie. In the wake of the investigation's standstill, the breakthrough finally came in 2021, nearly 25 years after Lolly Winans and Julie Williams were found lifeless. The FBI's Richmond field office, driven by advances in forensic science and a commitment to solving the cold case, took a fresh look at the evidence. They re-examined old leads, revisited witness statements, and subjected previously collected DNA samples to modern testing techniques. In June 2024, the moment came when a new round of DNA analysis revealed a striking match. This new testing identified a DNA profile that linked back to Walter Leo Jackson Sr., a convicted serial offender with a troubling criminal history. Jackson, who had been serving time in an Ohio prison before his passing in 2018, became the new focus of the investigation. The match was significant, not just because it identified a suspect, but because it marked a nearly 100% certainty that Jackson was responsible for the brutal crimes. Despite Jackson's passing, The revelation of his identity brought a mix of relief and sorrow for the families. Julie's father, Tom Williams, said it is immaterial to him that his daughter's perpetrator lost his life. He said, knowing that it is truly the right person involved in the slayings and other assaults, that he is the right person, is good. It would not serve me or anybody having to sit through a trial legally saying this is the person and putting him away.